we've got some folks here. And Al, let me see, where are you? Are you in the audience here? I heard your voice. Let's see. Okay, Al Rotondo.
I'm
Oh, there he is. Okay. He was off on the side there. Oh, I hope I get a good recording. Let's see. Now, what I'm going to do is tape this, and we'll see if when, and I'm getting used to the name, Spiff is Andy to me. He's going to be one of the speakers, and he brought his brilliant teacher with him, and I was able to meet her before at another conference. So you're going to be thrilled to hear what they've done. But Erica, you want to just give me your bio again now that I have the recorder on so that I can capture this for others?
Yes, sure. My name's Erica Lady, and I'm working with John Paradigm. He has a grid in OpenSim, and he's doing an education program, and I'm doing a program introducing seniors to virtual reality.
Yeah, and maybe you and I, I'm hoping you and I can talk later too, Erica, because I'm actually trying to do an outreach in my local area as well, so I could use some advice. And
oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and Selby, just maybe if you could introduce yourself to the folks on stage here.
Oh, I think they already know me.
yes, I do. I do for sure.
Oh, okay, that's right. You know him for Second Life. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah, right. Well, and and I'm doing pretty much the same things, although I'm doing it primarily in OpenSim now, and I'm trying to make connections among educators and point out ways in which educators can use the virtual world, and they're really growing, especially in OpenSim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was at an interesting meeting earlier today with the group out in California. I think if you remember Sean that spoke to us last week, I think we'll be getting them to come in and visit us soon too. So Al, you want to just take the mic and explain to everybody here who you are? Some don't know you, and I hope John can at least hear us.
Hi, I'm a alumni of the Mallard program, Master of Arts in Learning and Emerging Technologies, graduate of 2016, and I'm associated with a couple of universities here in New Jersey, and am a retired video producer for a very large health system in the Northeast, and pursuing an interest and continuing an interest in emerging technologies in the areas of virtual and augmented reality. So I have a very keen interest in your presentation this evening. Unfortunately, I may not be able to stay for the entire session. I have some previous commitments, but I'll stay as long as humanly possible, and I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. John, I don't know, did you get your mic working? Can you say hello?
He doesn't seem to have been able to get it to work.
Yeah.
I've been talking with him in chat in IM.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll hear more about him in a little bit. So I think what we generally do, and I don't know if we're going to get more of our group in here, so if people join later, fine, but we often have a pretty rich chat going. I don't think you have to address everybody's questions or comments. Sometimes we just throw in ideas. I try to capture the chat at the end and save it with our group notes because sometimes we don't have time to talk about everything. Everybody's busy, and so we stick to our hour. But I'll ask you folks to take the mic, and I guess maybe we can ask questions as you go. And I didn't put up the barrier. I can put up an invisible barrier because everybody can turn your slides. But if you like, I don't know if Spiff and Mary, you want to turn your own slides, or do you want to just tell me and I'll press the button? So how would you like the slide turning to go?
I think we can probably manage it. If nothing else, Mary, I can hit the slides.
Yeah, I'm comfortable, Spiff. If you'd want to control that, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay, and just tell me, but I'm going to turn my mic off so we don't get interference and take away. And did you say if questions come up, would you want people to raise them then or wait till the end? What would you prefer?
I think it's easy enough just to ask questions in local, and we'll try, and if it's something that we can address right away, we'll do it, and if not, we'll try and come back afterwards and connect. Does that sound good to you, Mary?
Yeah, that works fine for me.
All right. So are we good to get started?
Yep, go right ahead. And I think... But one of you, Mary, you might want to toggle your mic off if you're not speaking, because I think get a little feedback from you two over there. When you're speaking, keep your mic on. Just toggle it off if you're not speaking.
Sounds good. I think we're good. All right, I guess we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Nice to have a nice, comfy group here tonight. The structure of our presentation is, I think first Mary and I will just introduce you to ourselves just as our normal day-to-day personas as teachers, and then we'll kind of dig into the projects that we've created in OpenSim primarily for middle school. So I'll actually turn it over to Mary to just introduce herself first and some of the just amazing work she does even outside of OpenSim. So Mary?
Yeah, sure. You called me amazing and Eileen called me brilliant. So wow, this is quite an introduction. But no, I'm just a 6th grade teacher and I teach in Grand Island, New York. And the subject areas that I teach are ELA and science. And for the past 15 years, I've actually done ELA and social studies, and that's the origin of quite a few of these projects that we're going to do today. And Spiff tends to be the muse behind the operations, and then he says, "Hey, Mary, you want to try this?" And then we try these things in the classroom for my little 6th graders, and so it's turned out to be a pretty good symbiotic relationship over the years.
Well, and Mary and I both are very active in our local NICE affiliate, and Mary is a Teacher of the Year award for NICE. So, and she's also a finalist for the New York State Teacher of the Year. So, Mary does amazing work, as well as, and I know we'll talk about this probably later, but if you don't follow her blog, Your Smarticles, Mary, you want to talk about Your Smarticles real quick?
Sure. It's called yoursmarticles.blogspot.com, and I can toss it in the chat here. And it really is since probably 2008, maybe about over 10 years. I've been sharing just experiences that I've had in the classroom on the blog. So it's if you've ever blogged, it's a great place to share instructional ideas, technology tips, and technology always being my thing. I blogs a go-to to share those types of ideas, whether it's virtual reality, augmented reality, OpenSim. That blog chatting away and sharing what we do. So I'll put that link up in the...
Great, thanks, Mary. So a little bit about myself. I'm a former elementary teacher, believe it or not. 13 years as an elementary teacher, seemed like just yesterday, and then I've been at INP BOCES, which is kind of a complex thing to describe. I'll try and do my best with it. It's basically a shared service throughout Western New York. So I work for an organization, and we go to various schools throughout Western New York and work with teachers on various educational technology projects. So the project we'll talk about, this has kinds of its own wonderful little origin. But if you want to really find out much of anything about me, I have a blog called Coffee with a Geek, and I do kind of a rinky-dink YouTube interviews with educators, which I have a lot of fun with. And you'll probably find most of the information about me there, so I'll just post that in local. And I can also say that I'm the proud winner of the Thinkerer Award, named for Selby, and I was really grateful to do that at Virtual World's Best Practice, and it's an honor to be associated with Selby in that particular way. So let's go. Let's talk about the projects that we're here for. So to give you the nutshell of where this all began, and you can see the information on this first slide, it's just islandsoe.weebly.com is kind of the project starter page. So you'll see kind of a lot of the information of all the different projects we've done. I also created a video tutorial series you can see there as well. This is mostly for students just to get them kind of onboarded. But the project began in 2012 with a grant from the New York State Department of Education. I had this kind of grand scheme of an idea, and the grant really helped power that idea. So it gave us the opportunity to give professional development to teachers, to buy server space for the islands, and dig right in. So it was a 3-year grant, and so each year we tried to do a different project with the grant. The first year was probably the one that I probably developed the most personally myself, and this was what we call the Understanding the Holocaust project. And this project revolves around the famous book, journal, Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank, which I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have read, the tragic story of Anne Frank. And I chose this one because as a young child, of course, I read the book, and it always, it's such a gripping journal, and relates to, especially middle school students even today, as far as just the emotions of a young teen, but then surrounded by this, story of tragedy and war and the Holocaust, of course. So what we did with this one is we wanted to recreate the annex. And for those of you who are attending the Virtual World's Best Practices, we did create a mini version of the annex. If you want to come and see that, we do have an exhibit at the exhibit area. So you can get your own first-hand look at it. But basically, we wanted to give students, again, the novel was the most important part of this project. We don't want to lose sight of that. And then the students get to interact within a recreation of the secret annex. And then there's various Common Core-based activities within it. And then you can see in this slide here in the bottom right-hand corner, as you're looking at it, there's kind of the last two projects. One is students become a museum curator, so they design an exhibit in our OpenSim environment about the Holocaust, one of their learnings. And that can come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. The kids really are given free rein to create whatever they want. And then the other one, if you look at the bottom left, is kind of our reflection candle area. If you've ever been to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., there's a reflection area where you light a candle. And in this particular one, we kind of took that idea, and the kids wrote essays, and they put their essays within the candle. So the reason I bring both of those up is because one of the kind of worries with a project like this is because the Holocaust is such a deep subject matter, and yet you're bringing them into an OpenSim environment. We didn't want them to walk away thinking that this was just a game, because the content is so powerful. And what both of those last two kind of assessment pieces that the students do, the reflection candle and the exhibit, really showed that the students were learning more than just, this is a fun game. There is really powerful learning, and the kids' exhibits and their essays were really, just amazing, and gave us, that feedback that we needed to say, the kids got it. They weren't just, playing a game. They were actually learning some powerful subject matter. So that was year one. Year two is where Mary kind of came on board, and Mary had kind of alluded to it already, that there was this kind of spark of an idea, and I knew I'd seen Mary's work before at the NiceGate conference. She's always doing kind of high-end projects, and I knew she'd be the one teacher that could really, dig into a project like this without being, terrified of the technology. And so this was the Heir of the King project, and this was basically a medieval role play, and we gamified it. And I'll bring Mary in here to talk about it too, because she was such a big part of the curriculum writing process and the game development process. So you want to talk a little bit about this one, Mary?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you brought me along, kicking and screaming and excited at the same time, and it was really transformational for me, having never used OpenSim, having never used virtual environments, and meeting this man, and he's saying, "Oh yes, we can do this with students," and here's kind of the seed of the idea. So I was teaching social studies at the time, and Spiff had conceived of this thought of maybe making a gamified platform where the kids can come into a Middle Ages kingdom and use that as their learning tool. So what we ended up doing is developing this Middle Ages world and presenting the kids with what I kind of look at as a mystery. They had to see who the rightful heir to the throne was going to be. And we had some actors come in from a local school. Was it Buff State? I believe.
Yep, Buff State.
Yeah, from Buff State. And they did voiceover roles, and they took on the roles of 4 characters. And the students had to listen to the characters speak and hear what they had to say and take notes on the clues. And then they had to visit these areas. And you can see on the screen, there's the King's Chambers, a medieval marketplace, a castle, coat of arms. And they had to gather clues about these characters while being immersed in the Middle Ages. So all along they were learning about what a coat of arms means, represents, and what are the parts of a castle, and what are the different roles in feudal society, as well as just the medieval marketplace and what that represents. So as they went along, they would gather badges, and so you can see on the right the Lancelot badge. So if they achieved a certain level, let's say they finished the coat of arms station, they would earn a badge for that station. And in my classroom, I actually put up paper, coat of arms, and we stuck the badges on there. And it was sort of a real visual, tangible measure of how the students were doing collecting their badges. And I know other teachers enjoy doing a digital badging, and it was just, kind of to each his own. But either way, that gamified platform was immensely motivating for the students. Like, they really, truly couldn't wait to get in the OpenSim each day, to continue learning, to be competitive in a unique way. And I saw an amazing revolution in my classroom. And again, this was the first time I had ever used OpenSim for anything. So, getting the kids in and corralling them and having them agree to, digital citizenships and this kind of Lord Darkraven's set of rules for the kingdom, and then teaching them how to navigate and teleport and set a home base and all of that. So the computers we used were in a computer lab that we would go to when we could. And I had 3 classes of social studies. So that first year, I brought in 75 kids. So 3 different classes of kids came in the world. And so I was not just doing it once, I was doing it 3 times a day with all of these students. And in terms of assessment, what we ended up doing at the end of the unit, not only did we use same assessment to measure understanding of the feudal system and understanding of what a coat of arms is and all those components, we also did a piece of argumentative writing at the end. So the students had to make a claim as to who they believed was the rightful heir to the throne. Then they had to provide the evidence that they collected in this storm field to support their claim. So in terms of this robust curriculum, meeting curriculum, we were really proud of what we had done, because it met every single standard for my social studies curriculum, as well as, claim evidence reasoning writing, which was, at the time started, and even now, it's just one of those that I have to hit in, right? So that's kind of in a nutshell what we did with. Keep us going there, Spiff?
Yeah, sure. And before we move on, just, we did go through our share of, bumps and bruises and, server failures and crashes in the middle of things. And I guess, and I say this, for me, being more in the background than Mary was, I mean, at least the kids, I think, hung with it. And they persevered through a lot of the challenges we had early on. And we learned so much. I can't say we know it all, but now we've got a pretty stable server system and go. So year 3 of the grant was what we called kind of the Building by Design project. And for those of you familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture, in Buffalo, where both of us are near, there is one of Frank Lloyd Wright's opuses, as he would call it, and that is the Darwin Martin House. And the Darwin Martin House, we kind of connected with him. And again, I think for those of you who have seen this with students, you know that the passion for building is almost insatiable. And you certainly can see it with Minecraft and other software that's out there now as well. But we needed to design something that could get these kids building. So this year we partnered with the Darwin Martin House, who was a really great partner. They let us actually work on site. They let us bring the teachers into the kind of gardener's cottage, and we spent the day in this beautiful architectural scenery in the middle of Buffalo designing buildings, thinking how we were going to create art with the students. But this one was really kind of almost student driven in the sense that students really wanted to build. So we needed to design something that certainly we love free form building, but we also wanted to focus the building, and this was the perfect way to combine Frank Lloyd Wright's work with student builds. And again, I'll let Mary take over, because she took off with this and dug deep into Frank Lloyd Wright and got her kids building. So say more, Mary.
Yeah, this was a really amazing thing. So if you look back at the Heir of the King that we showed you, that was very much a consumable in a sense. We did all the building, we did all the design, and we laid things out. So it was really front load heavy. And all of you probably know when you build anything, it takes a lot of time to do the building on the front end, to then have the students go in there. This was pretty amazing because it was sort of, we flipped it. Yeah. We flipped it, and I wanted the students to do the building, and so I kind of learned right along with them. So in this project, we launched it with my ELA students, and I turned it into a research project. So I used Google Tour Builder and designed a research project for them to first learn about who Frank Lloyd Wright was and learn about his building strategies. And then on Google Tour Builder, they went to visit not all of his homes, but many of his homes throughout the world so they could see the different architectural principles. And of course, we included the Darwin Martin House on the list. But through that, the kids learned terms such as abstract design and, cantilevers, central hearth, and those principles that were really important to Frank Lloyd Wright. And you have to remember, these are 11-year-olds, so, we didn't go over the top, but man, what they did accomplish was incredible. So first they did the research, they learned about his building principles, and then SPIF basically gave us land, and the objective was to have the students build in the form of Frank Lloyd Wright. And I learned a lot about kids and building all along the way here, because in my head I thought, oh, this is great, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that much. So I'm going to give them a prefab house, and I'm just going to have them decorate the house. So, I plopped all of these prefabbed houses all over this land that Spiff had given me. And I'm like, okay, Johnny and Luke, you're in this house, blah, blah, blah. The first thing the kids asked me was, could you please delete that house? I want to build my own. And it was amazing, because I was like, wait, what? They're like, I want to build my own. I don't want a pre-made house. So I was like, okay, sure. So I ended up deleting all of the houses that I had plopped down for them to decorate, and watched this explosion in creativity happen. And boy, was it exciting. And, the phrases they used and the terms that they adopted and the things that they were able to create that truly emulated Frank Lloyd Wright blew our minds. I'm going to put a link in here. I wouldn't say watch it now, but if you're interested at some point in time, I think the link went correctly. it is a video montage of all of the student work that created that particular year. And I've done this project several times since, but this very first year, for me was such a marvel because I learned how much these students were capable of. And, these beautiful homes with these central hearths with this custom made furniture. They made barrel chairs and eye-shaped tables, and they put stained glass all over their homes. They added, lattice work roofs and cantilevers and all these different things. And I thought, I had no idea that this was possible. So it was a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, and I also put a link to some of the pictures that I took of your students' works as well, so they can get a quick kind of slideshow look at some of those pictures as well.
Just on a side note, the video that you'll watch is a machinima that I submitted to ISTE a couple of years ago, and it won one of the awards. It won the Machinima Award at ISTE, so that was kind of a cool experience as well.
Okay, so, after kind of, those were the 3 years of the grant. So after the grant, it was really trying, okay, now we pretty much can do, take this any direction we want. And Mary, of course, took it in quite a few directions. So I'll kind of turn it over to her after this and let her tell you what kind of things she did. And she would basically say, hey, I need an island for this. And I'd say, okay, and then I'd really just kind of get out of the way and watch the magic happen. But there were some other schools that did some work, and I'll just send a shout out to them. I did work with an art teacher in Fredonia who wanted to, she was on her last 2 years before retiring. Isn't it amazing? Like, teachers try things right before they're about to walk out the door, which is frustrating, but wonderful, I guess, in a sense too. But she tried it and was terrified of the project, but we did it was really fun to have kids create artworks and bring in artworks to there. So that was one of the other projects that we did. And then this was one of my kind of happiest days, although again, I will want to see more out of these teachers. I had a teacher who was a Civil War reenactor. He used to go to Gettysburg every year and do reenactments. And then I had a couple of other teachers that have some islands on our grid from Lancaster schools. And they were also social studies teachers. And I said, hey, guys, why don't we take just a professional development day and let you guys create something? We've got these amazing content wizards. Let's take a day and let's build a Civil War battlefield. And they did it, and it was such a fun experience to just have teachers come together and build and use their content and their experiences and have fun. And the history conversations were amazing. The building conversations were amazing. So it was really just a fun day. And again, for the Civil War reenactor, he still isn't comfortable enough with the technology to work with his students. So there's going to be a next step there. But the other teachers, of course, were already into it. They've already created virtual worlds for their students on islands. So that's just, again, a sidebar project. And so again, I'll turn it over to Mary to kind of let her talk about a lot of the really just cool things. And again, it's so rewarding for me because that's what I wanted to see out of this project, was to get teachers into this and then take off with it. And Mary took off with it and took it in a lot of different directions. So take it away.
Well, you put me in a position, and you can't just expose students to OpenSim and then say, okay, the project's over, and close up shop and no longer do it. So it was like, I have to do more. These students aren't giving me a choice. They're clamoring for more. So we did pull together a few sort of off-the-cuff projects, and one that's not even listed here was an invention project that we came up with, almost like the Shark Tank idea. So I had my students in OpenSim, and they were building inventions that they felt like would impact society in some way. And we went in OpenSim, and they actually built their inventions and designed them and put them in stores and shops and decorated their shops and marketed their product and everything else. And that was crazy cool and really exciting. And so we closed out our year doing the Invention Convention project, just because they had become such great builders with the Frank Lloyd Wright project, and I just wanted to let them go. I'm like, I want you guys to just go and run with it. So that was really, really cool. And then the Weston game sort of came up, And there's a whole lot of really neat things embedded in the Westing game that really represent a lot of what I do as a teacher in my classroom. It's a little bit VR, a little bit AR, a little bit scavenger hunt kind of breakout idea, and it's all this amalgamation of all that in an open sim. So the Westing game is a lot of fun. And again, I said, hey, can I have some land? And Spiff said, sure, what do you want? And he gave me a mansion. What a guy, I got a mansion. And so what I ended up doing is I turned that mansion into the Westing game. And the Westing game is a book that was written in the 60s. And it's essentially a very traditional classic murder mystery style novel. And it's about, you could collect clues along the way and you have to solve, who murdered. I'm going to put that in quotes because if you've ever read the book, the person doesn't actually, well, if you're going to read the book, I don't want to spoil it. But anyway, it's a murder without necessarily a murder. Very appropriate for 60s. So he gave me this mansion. And what I did was I embedded little riddle questions all throughout the mansion, and I created sort of a scavenger hunt. And if you want to change the slide, I can be a little bit more specific here on how this worked. And we used the Westing game as a review. So there's my lovely mansion, and the story setting begins at Halloween time. So, we added some pumpkins to it, and we decorated it all up. That was just a IR that we uploaded. You can go to the next slide, too. And then when the students were brought, double clicked. So when the students were brought into the mansion, what they needed to do is they needed to search for these little dollars that I embedded throughout the mansion. And if they clicked on one of the dollars, it would give them a clue. And if, I don't know if you can see that, but that clue talks about one of the characters. It says, the friendly doorman greets residents of Sunset Towers with a smile each day. His nickname reminds us of a beach. His name is Sandy McSuthers. So the students type in chat the character's name, and it gives them another clue or a teleport or something else. In this case, it gives them a channel. I didn't want the students all answering in local chat. I wanted them answering questions on a channel. So they learned that the channel number for the remainder of the scavenger hunt was going to be 76. And so then they proceeded through the Westing Mansion using channel 76 to answer all of the different questions. And every time they answered a question, you can click to the next slide, it gave them a teleport. And the teleport took them to a different location where, and to me this was the coolest thing, you can click to the next slide, where they had a red lens reveal. So what I did is I just, on a Google slide, I created this image where they can take a little piece of cellophane and they can hold it up to the screen and they can see through the yellow text and the red text and the pink text into, through it, and they can see the blue text behind it. And so it revealed a piece of a riddle. And then on that sheet on the right-hand side, they would collect all of these lines in the riddle. And at the very end, they had to solve the riddle. But along the way, of course, they were proving their understanding of the novel and reviewing for the novel test that we had in a couple of days. And I think if you go to the next slide, I can't remember. Yep. And once they collected all of the riddle lines and figured out that the riddle was referring to a compass, then they would type in the word compass at the box. And when they typed it in, it activated their avatar and let it do the chicken dance. And let me tell you, when you're 11 and your teacher lets you do the chicken dance on the top of the mansion, you're a rock star. It's the best thing ever. So they really, really love doing the chicken dance on the top of the mansion, but they also love that. It's almost like a breakout. If you've ever done a breakout in your classroom, it's a lot like that. And, they had the solution. They solved the problem, pieced the pieces of a puzzle together, and it was flirting or plurning, I guess you could say. They had fun while they were learning or at least demonstrating their understanding. So this was absolutely one of my favorites just because, the giggles and the excitement, and I had, concrete, tangible evidence of, oh, look at them go. Like they were just super, super engaged. So it was a lot of fun, and it wasn't a crazy amount of work. And I think that was the other great part. Because it was an OAR, the mansion was there. I just had to add, 7 or 8 boxes along the way and put the riddle clues in there. But it wasn't a crazy amount of work, and it was fun. So if we want to keep going, the next project is sort of an ongoing thing that I'm working on at the moment. And I'm teaching science this year, and it's my first year with the Next Generation Science Standards in 6th grade. So our building just adopted them, and it's a lot to to take on in one year. But I'm not ready to, well, not ready. I'm not going to abandon using OpenSim. And so the idea here is to kind of create a digital portfolio of their learning and their understanding throughout the course of the year in science. And so we had the small place that we want to give to each of the students. And then as we go through each unit, they're demonstrating their understanding of each unit. And so if you click forward, you can see, like, this would be the front of, this is the front of the mall space. And so this is a student science lab. And actually at that front door there is a model that a student designed in Tinkercad, and I just uploaded it into the OpenSim and gave it a little bit of color. So now they've got a molecule in the front of their lab to demonstrate when we're talking about, molecules and matter at the beginning of the year. And then if you click again and we go inside the lab, the idea is for them to, include evidence of everything that we've learned throughout the course of the year. So, starting on the left, you've got the periodic table of elements, you have molecules and chemical reactions that they learn. There's a density column there. And so the objective here is to have the students create all of these things and populate their quote unquote lab as they go throughout the year. And so that's sort of the idea behind that concept. Truth be told, it hasn't really been fleshed out yet. It hasn't happened. I still have a lot of school year left, but I'd like to do this as almost the end of the year assessment. A lot of NGSS isn't about paper assessments. It's about portfolios that demonstrate learning. And so this really is the goal, is to have them, in OpenSim, creating their evidence of their learning through the year. And then finally, and this is almost like a side note, I don't know, and I'm going to pause, and if you're in chat, I'm going to pause and let me know, are you familiar with MergeCube? Because I've become slightly obsessed with this little AR tool. Okay. Called MergeCube. All right. Yeah, it's really starting to catch fire in the educational scene. And MergeCube users aren't going to be OpenSim users necessarily. I think a lot of MergeCube people are just discovering it because it's AR, and AR is exciting, and AR is something that you use instructionally in the classroom. So I've been a very big fan of the MergeCube, and I'm learning that. Well, let me back up and just say, if you're not familiar with the MergeCube, it is essentially an augmented reality trigger. So it's a foam cube with these images, as you can see on the slide there, on all 6 sides of the cube. And it allows you to trigger an augmented reality experience. And those experiences are built into apps. And it's anything from, a beating heart to a labeled skull with all of the different parts of the skull to games that the students can play that are similar to Minecraft and things like that. So I've been using it a lot, Eileen, in my classes as well, and the kids love it. And so I just had this thought one day, well, I can use the red lens reveal in OpenSim, kind of this phygital experience, like half physical and half digital. Well, what if I put a MergeCube trigger in OpenSim? What would happen? And if you are sitting at your computer right now and you are familiar with MergeCube, I would encourage you to open up one of your MergeCube apps and hold it up to the screen. Because what's super cool is that target, where you see that word merge on my slide right there, it will trigger on your digital device, on your phone or your tablet. It will activate. And so it's almost like you've got an OpenSim AR amalgamation. And I think I don't know if you just did it, Scott, or like if you're just thinking like, this is kind of a cool idea. Because for me, it was like, oh my gosh, this is a really cool idea. To be able to have them hold a tablet in front of a computer screen and then have this interactive thing happen. So if you want to change the slide, Andy, I was like, I totally wanted to try this. And so I did. And this is a picture of Spiff. I don't know if you want to weigh in here. Where were we? This is the most recent conference we did. It wasn't VWBPE. I can't remember which one it was.
Maybe the OpenSim Open
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes,
think
it
it
was
was
the
Open Community.
OSCC. Yeah, it was OSCC, and so I built myself a digital merge cube in OSCC, and I plopped it on the ground, and then I held up my phone, and sure enough, the little snow globe that you see in the picture there showed up on my phone. So it almost looked like the snow globe was in the OpenSim conference, but really all that was sitting there was a merge cube. So I had like an AR, VR thing going on, and it was just really super cool. So I feel like this has a ton of potential to create a really wonderful interactive experience for the students. So again, if you happen to have something on your device, I'm not going to say download it now or anything like that just for this our time, but it might be worth investigating because I just thought it was a really fun, cool idea. So that's what you're seeing on. So I think maybe, I mean, that was kind of, we sort of flew through things, but that was really what we wanted to share. I don't know if anybody has questions or Spiff, you want to weigh in with anything?
No, I think questions is good. I think, we covered so much ground, but we also, if we could have dug deep into every kind of project that we worked with, but it's been certainly for me one of the most rewarding, 5, 6 years of my career working with this. So,
Well, and I definitely have some questions, but I want to let this group talk first. So I'll does anyone want to take the mic at this point? It's Eileen, and I'll turn my mic off. Okay, one thing I want to say, I was just fortunate enough to be in California earlier today, just at one of their sessions, and they have enviable technology. And it was the group that was working with some of these kind of sophisticated Unity-based AR, VR type of areas, and they came back with talking about some of their findings. They had some very interesting archaeological areas that people go in. They had those haptic devices on their hands. They had headsets on, and the students were having a great experience. But then later in the study, they found out that they weren't learning any more than just a traditional method. And as they started teasing into it, they found, yeah, there was a fun game. And these were, early 20-year-old students. So they got into the game part of it, but they lost sight of the learning part. So I'm so pleased to hear how Mary, with Andy's support, with Spiff's support, really kept that education piece in there. So I want to just applaud you for that. But how did you? Yeah, well, Scott, what they were thinking was these were gamers. They came in and they were so just into the thrill of the game that they weren't paying attention to the archaeology. So, Mary, how have you addressed that? And I do see with this last one you're talking about with the STEM project, you're going to be bringing that in towards the end of the year. So how do you make sure that they don't get so enamored with the technology they forget the learning that you want?
It's yeah, my mic is on. Well, it's interesting that you bring this up because I was just called to task on this recently in a forum where I shared something, actually augmented reality, but the Merge Cube, and I shared some work that I had done with the Merge Cube out to a group, and a professor, so he's an educator of the 20-something crowd, he chimed in and referred to it as, oh my gosh, some of the terms he used, trying to see if I can find it as I'm talking, but he just felt as though it was nothing more than a gimmick, and it was something that wasn't a learning tool, it was just a worksheet in disguise, et cetera, et cetera. And I really gave his comments some thought because I did, I kind of, it put me back on my heels, and I thought, is that really what I'm doing? And then I stopped and I said, no, because I know my 11-year-olds, and I think it's an age group thing. And I know that If you can't get 11-year-olds to love learning in 6th grade when they're in middle school, they may never love learning and they may never love school. And so that kind of has been my case for a lot of these things that I do. Sure, could I replace the Westingame Mansion review with pieces of paper or a lockbox or something else? Yes. Yet you are reaching students that you could never reach necessarily. And I've had firsthand experience of how some of these digital experiences have tapped into the most recalcitrant students that I couldn't reach any other way. They were zero engaged, and they had been zero engaged for the entire year. But the minute they had an avatar and they were in a virtual world and they had a teacher that spoke their language, that connection was made, and that, they were ignited. And so for that purpose alone, even if it may be glitzy or bells and whistles, it was worth it. And Scott, I think that's a great question. That I don't know, because I don't teach that age of student, but there does seem to be a divide that I'm seeing between those college age students and some of these experiences and the younger students, because I can measure and I can say that yes, I have been effective, and my student scores are excellent, and the student test taking from one year to the next, it's the same test, it's just a different experience, they're doing as well if not better than other students. So I at least have my own anecdotal evidence, but I don't know.
It's
a
an
tough question to answer.
Because I'm targeting the project I'm working on undergrads, and my project, hopefully, if this comes out well, will be to mix or to try an LMS system, a traditional LMS system, versus a fully integrated narrative environment for art history curriculum. And you just brought up a very valid point that I've been thinking about. Is this going to be considered a game by 18, 19-year-old millennials? I mean, do they take it seriously enough? And I guess that's something to really take into consideration. Is it challenging enough for them? I guess that's where I'm going.
Yeah, because when it's a game and you're 11, that's a good thing. But when it's a game and you're 20 or 19, I don't know.
Well,
I guess you'd have to make sure that you have the rubric and you have the expectations and the measures provided ahead of time.
Right. Right. Okay, so it's really about the assessments and then the rigor of the course, I would presume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Well, and even just to kind of go back 20 years back when I was doing my doctorate, I've always seen technology as hopefully a salvation, or at least part of the clue. And I had been a chemist. Okay, so it was 1997. I was working out at SUNY Oneonta, where the professor came out with a chemistry book with the first interactive virtual models that you could, turn a molecule around. And I was so excited. So I taped his class, I taped his teaching, I interviewed the students, I had them working with the molecular models, and I interviewed them about some questions of science. To be very disappointed at the end that I didn't find they learned the molecular models. But when I went back and looked at why, it was because the instructor had those kind of off to the side as something they played with. His instruction never asked them to explain anything with the molecular models. So often enough we'll blame the technology, but it really, the technology never solves the problem, but it's a piece. Did it work in? Did you, as I see you doing brilliantly, Mary, tie it in with the environment? And you're right there. You have the anecdotal evidence, but you have much more evidence than any researcher going in will have to see if the kids really are learning. So I think it's really that combination of having these wonderful tools, but integrating the tools in very meaningful ways. So I think you've been a wonderful role model, because you show, and you continue to ask. There is no definitive answer. And then I would like to say, too, we tend to think certain older methods are proven. They haven't particularly been proven either. It's just historical. So I thank you for just kind of constantly illustrating that we need to bring these tools in. I have heard way back to Plato and Aristotle when written words first came out, there was not everybody like that, because how could a written word convey all the emotion that a person could convey? But that words couldn't. So anyway, I thank you for pointing that out, but I will let the group here not sleep through world history, so I will stop talking. But more questions from the group?
Actually, I want to jump on what you're saying, Eileen, because I presented yesterday on exclusively the Merge Cube, which is an AR experience, as you kind of described, that will put a model into the student's hands. So, whether it's an animal cell or a plant cell or a human heart or a brain, what tends to happen with the kids is if you put that in their hands, you get an ooh and an ah, and then they move on. Until you create a robust experience to go along with it. And so whenever I'm doing something like with the Merge Cube, it's always with a companion set of questions or a scavenger hunt with a riddle. Again, 11-year-olds, so I'm sorry. But, it might have a riddle about the solar system, and they're looking at this 3D model of all the planets in the solar system, and it says, now find this particular one that has this number of rings, and it has this feature and that feature. And, it just, you have to take it a little bit further, because students can't be relied on, those observational skills to note and notice unless they're guided through it. And I think that applies through 3D models and 3D experiences as well. So I love what you said, because I totally agree with it.
Yes, technology is not going to put teachers out of business. It's going to keep us there, because we need to create the total environment, the total experience. And what I find with immersive worlds, with some of these augmented areas that, is my latest interest, they're just tools in the hands of teachers to create meaningful learning environments. And it's going to take just more and more subtlety among us teachers. But I think what I like about OpenSim is it puts things that had only been in the past in the hands of game designers. It makes us have our low budget teaching equivalents. So we may not look as good as a big game engine, but we can do it ourselves, and we can work it into our curriculum. So any more questions, comments from the audience? And I really want to thank you both for coming. If you don't mind, I did tape this, and we keep a little archive. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for listening. And we're going to be going to your blogs, and Merge Cubes is on my to-do list with a bunch of other things after the dean has finished me telling what I have to do. Yeah.
If I could just throw one last little comment in, I think one of the things we're kind of maybe tapping on as we're talking about assessments and interests, I think creation is kind of universal as far as the learning process goes. And I think that's one of the things that I think is great about whether you're talking about OpenSim or CoSpaces or even Merge Cube, things where kids can actually build. I think those are universal learning catches for us. So, and again, as you just said, I mean, one of the things I like about OpenSim is you can get a bunch of people building at the same time, which is something you can't do in so many other high-end building programs. So,
yeah, and I'm hoping to partnerships. I know Skip, you and I have, well, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Andy, we've talked about doing some things together, and again, it's a question of time and getting to it, but we should get together, do a kind of joint research. The nice thing about virtual is, we can visit one another's places, like you're visiting mine. I am the least of the students. I show the students, I have a STEM background. I write technical journals. Students like Scott sitting here do very creative, beautiful things. So we'll have to find ways to maybe merge and share. We have work that we'd like you to see, and we would like to see more about your work. So, yeah, and we do. Scott sitting here modestly is one of our real artists. Susan is sitting here modestly as one of our performance artists. And so they're going to be able to bring something that technophobes like me, well, no, techno-lovers like me can do. But I just enjoy seeing the creative people coming. So let's keep the conversation going, and I'm glad, especially since you're out in Buffalo area, you don't have to drive home. But are there any weather concerns out there right now?
The moon is clear here. How about where you are, Mary?
Oh, the only concern is when is spring going to come? Because we're really tired of it not taking cold.
Yes, but we sure do appreciate it. We appreciate it when it comes. Oh, Scott says it's going to be here on Saturday. Scott, we're going to hold you to that. Well, thank you, everybody. As I always say, I have to move on, but you guys can certainly hang out as long as you like, and let's keep the conversations going. And thank you so much. We really appreciate your sharing and the creative things you're doing. You're very inspiring. So
thank you for having us. So
all
much.
right. All right. Well, take care. Have a good evening.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye. I'm going to have to check out. Thanks. And I'll be in touch.
Awesome.